Literature adds to reality. It does not simply describe it. It enriches the necessary competencies that daily life requires and provides, and in this respect, it irrigates the deserts that our lives have already become. No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. 30 was so strange for me. I've really had to come to terms with the fact that I am now a walking and talking adult. Part of every misery is, so to speak, the misery's shadow or reflection. The fact that you don't merely suffer, but have to keep on thinking about the fact that you suffer. I not only live each endless day in grief, but live each day thinking about living each day in grief. Always prefer the plain, direct word to the long, vague one. Don't implement promises, but keep them. I gave in and admitted that God was God. Let's pray that the human race never escapes from earth to spread its iniquity elsewhere. Even in literature and art, no man who bothers about originality will ever be original. Whereas if you simply try to tell the truth without caring 2 pence how often it has been told before, you will, 9 times out of 10, become original without ever having noticed it. Nothing that you have not given away will ever really be yours. Nothing is more dangerous to one's own faith than the work of an apologist. No doctrine of the faith seems to me so spectral, so unreal as one that I have just successfully defended in a public debate. Miracles do not, in fact, break the laws of nature. An explanation of cause is not a justification by reason. What I call myself now is hardly a person at all. It's mainly a meeting place for various natural forces, desires, and fears, etc., some of which come from my ancestors and some come from my education, some perhaps from devils. The self you are really intended to be is something that lives not from nature, but from God. Everyone has noticed how hard it is to turn our thoughts to God when everything is going well with us. While what we call our own life remains agreeable, we will not surrender it to Him. What then can God do in our interest but make our own life less agreeable to us and take away the plausible sources of false happiness? Reason is the natural order of truth, but imagination is the origin of meaning. A man who is eating or lying with his wife or preparing to go to sleep in humility, thankfulness, and temperance is by Christian standards in an infinitely higher state than one who is listening to Bach or reading Plato in a state of pride. With the possible exception of the equator, everything begins somewhere. The real problem is not why I'm pious, humble, believing people suffer, but why some do not. There is no uncreated being except God. God has no opposite. A young man who wishes to remain a sound atheist cannot be too careful of his reading. Do not use words too big for the subject. Don't say infinitely when you mean very, otherwise you'll have no word left when you want to talk about something really infinite. Can a mortal ask questions which God finds unanswerable? Quite easily, I should think. All nonsense questions are unanswerable. We are not living in a world where all roads are reti of a circle and where all, if followed long enough, will therefore draw gradually nearer and finally meet at the center, rather in a world where every road after a few miles forks into two, and each of those into two again, and at each fork you must make a decision. Always try to use the language so as to make quite clear what you mean, and make sure your sentence couldn't mean anything else. The lion all began with a picture of a fawn carrying an umbrella and parcels in a snowy wood. This picture had been in my mind since I was about 16. Then one day, when I was about 40, I said to myself, let's try to make a story about it. A dogmatic belief in objective value is necessary to the very idea of a rule which is not tyranny, or an obedience which is not slavery. The long, dull, monotonous years of middle-aged prosperity or middle-aged adversity are excellent campaigning weather for the devil. What we call man's power over nature turns out to be a power exercised by some men over other men with nature as its instrument. Humans are amphibians, half spirit and half animal. As spirits, they belong to the eternal world, but as animals, they inhabit time. I sometimes wonder whether all pleasures are not substitutes for joy. Some people write heavily, some write lightly. I prefer the light approach because I believe there is a great deal of false reverence about. There is too much solemnity and intensity in dealing with sacred matters, too much speaking in holy tones. Anthropomorphic animals, when taking out of narrative into actual visibility, always turn into buffoonery or nightmare. There is, hidden or flaunted, a sword between the sexes till an entire marriage reconciles them. I think that all things in their way reflect heavenly truth, the imagination not least.